Well, that's what politicians do, right? They promise stuff to get votes. And Trump promised everything to everybody. Look, he promised no taxes on expats. He was going to eliminate the U.S. income tax on expats to get their vote, right? He hasn't even mentioned that ever since he was elected. So those guys got totally screwed. He kept his promises to the Bitcoin community. But that enabled a lot of the Bitcoiners to cash out, which is, I think, what happened. There are a lot of people now that are hoping he keeps his promises on Fannie and Freddie. We'll see. That would be another massive mistake. That Bitcoin leads people to gold, that will be one positive development. In fact, one thing that Bitcoin has done is a lot of people know what fiat currencies are. They never knew before Bitcoin. I mean, it was very few people that ever heard the term fiat. Now I hear it all the time. Yeah. So at least, it's been resurrected and people understand it. But, when I was at the Vegas conference and I talked to David Bailey, who, owns the Bitcoin magazine and hosts the conference. I said, David, I'm responsible for more people at your conference owning Bitcoin than anybody else. And he said, yeah, I know. You're the reason I own Bitcoin. So, that's like a common thing. But the reason that so many of these people just assume that I must secretly own Bitcoin is given the fact that we have so much in common and they're so convinced that Bitcoin is great. How can I not know this? Right? That doesn't even make any sense to them that I wouldn't agree with them. And so the only way, I guess, to square that is, well, he must be buying it secretly, and this is all part of an act. And it was funny when my son started talking about Bitcoin, they thought, yeah, I had him up to it, and I'm buying all this Bitcoin through my son, and I'm doing, which is all nonsense. But because they don't want to accept the fact that I legitimately don't like it. I don't believe in it. I think it's a scam. I think it's going to collapse. It's a decentralized Ponzi, a pyramid scheme. They can't accept that I believe that, but I do. But the fact that I believe that is, a threat to the whole system because the system is based on a shared belief. What gives Bitcoin value is the fact that there's a community of people who think it has value. And it's that belief and confidence system that is the total source of whatever Bitcoin's got. But in order for Bitcoin not to collapse, and in fact, to keep going up in price, the community of believers has to constantly increase. That's why they're constantly proselytizing, right? They're like the Hari Kirsners of the investment world because you have to keep bringing new converts in. And one of the reasons that Bitcoin likes to trash gold is because they're saying that it's an alternative to gold. It's better than gold. We don't need gold. In fact, some of the most ridiculous things I hear about gold come from the Bitcoin community. It's a worthless rock. It doesn't have any value. I went onto the Spaces the other day, and there was some guy on there thinks he's so smart. And he says, well, if it wasn't for gold being money, it would be about $50 an ounce. He goes, it's useless. $50 an ounce is like, first of all, it costs $1,500 an ounce to mine it. So if gold was at $50 an ounce, there'd be no more gold, right? Nobody would be digging it out of the ground. But the demand would skyrocket because if you could buy gold at $50 an ounce, people would use it. They wouldn't even use copper. They would just use gold for everything if it was that cheap. So it's like, it can't be there. They don't understand the value. The guy was saying, well, gold has no use. There's nothing you can do with it. I was like, what do you mean? It's got more uses than any metal we got. People have no appreciation for gold in the Bitcoin community. Now, not all of them.
I think it's changing.
But the reason I'm against Bitcoin, and it's not that I'm just trying to sell more gold. People say, you're just a shill. You want people to buy gold. Yeah, I do want people to buy gold. But I don't want people to buy Bitcoin thinking they're buying gold because they're not. I want people, if people want to buy Bitcoin, doesn't bother me, but I want them to understand what they're buying. They're buying a highly a speculative token that has no real relationship to gold whatsoever. It's not a digital version of gold any more than an image of a hamburger is digital food. It's not. If you had a diet of digital food, you would starve to death. So Bitcoin is not gold. They can draw a coin and color it gold, but that doesn't make it gold. You can't conduct electricity with it. I can't make, a bracelet out of it. I can't do anything with it. But it is a highly speculative token that people collect. And to the extent that more people want to collect Bitcoin, the price could go up. So you can make money speculating in Bitcoin, but it's not gold. It's very different. So if you're just looking for a store of value, an inflation hedge, a safe haven, you don't consider Bitcoin. Just look at gold.
Yeah.
But if you're looking to speculate, if you think Bitcoin just might go to 500,000 or a million and you want to throw some money there because you think that's going to happen, you could do that. I just don't think it's a good bet at this point. I mean, I just think there's a lot of downside risk now, and I think there's better upside potential. I'd rather buy gold mining stocks. People say, why don't you just put 1% in Bitcoin? I'd rather put an extra 1% into gold mining stocks if I want to gamble. I think there's better odds there. Yeah. I like the asymmetry of that trade better. I think I got a lot of upside relative to the downside.
As the Bitcoin community grows, supporters often believe that anyone who understands monetary fundamentals must naturally arrive at the same conclusion they did. This mindset fuels the assumption that skeptics secretly own Bitcoin or will eventually capitulate. Stories circulate of critics supposedly buying behind the scenes, driven by shared views on inflation, central banking, and debt. Yet not every monetary realist embraces crypto. Some see Bitcoin's reliance on continuous adoption, its need for a steady influx of believers, as a structural weakness. The contrast between conviction and skepticism creates an ongoing cultural divide between digital asset enthusiasts and traditional hard money advocates.
Well, I mean, the correction, I mean, gold's 4,100. I mean, there's no correction other than the fact that gold got to, almost 4,400. But there's probably only been, I haven't counted them, but just a handful of days where gold's even traded above 4,100. So what happened is gold just had a big spike and then kind of retraced that spike. But, it's hard to say gold's in a correction when it's at $4,100, right? I mean, this is up until a month ago, that would have been an all-time record high. So, but I think the driving force has come from central banks. Now, maybe central banks didn't drive it up to 43.60 that week. Maybe that was some, spec money coming in finally off the sidelines, jumping on and then, getting slapped. But I think for the past couple of years, the move from 2,000 up to 4,000 was driven in large part by central banks. And why are central banks buying all this gold? Well, I think they can read the writing on the wall with respect to the US dollar, and they are looking to replace their dollars with gold, to have more gold backing their currencies than dollars. Backing one fiat currency with another fiat currency doesn't really accomplish much, but backing it by gold does. And I think the central banks have a lot of reasons to do that. Number one, it's political, especially after Biden sanctioned Russia. That was a warning to other nations. You could be next. So don't have a lot of dollars, don't have a lot of treasuries because, we'll use it against you. We'll pull the rug out from under you. So that was a warning shot that we never should have fired. I said it was a mistake when Biden did it. Number one. Number two, now that the deficits are $2+ trillion as far as the eye can see, now that we've passed the big, beautiful bill, which made the Biden deficits even bigger, I think it's pretty obvious to our creditors that we're never going to get our fiscal house in order. And therefore, we're never going to be able to repay the debts. So why own treasuries? It's either going to be a default or massive inflation. So better to get out now. So the fiscal situation is clear. Even the Republicans won't do anything about it. Even Trump won't do anything about it. And now I think the last thing, apart from the tariffs, which I think pissed everybody off and created another reason to get out of dollars, is the fact that Trump is now taking over the Fed, tearing down what remains of the pretense of Fed independence. He's packing the Fed with his cronies. He's going to reappoint a new Fed chair that'll be an Uber dove. And we got the Supreme Court decision on Lisa Cook, where the Supreme Court might strike down the very idea of an independent Fed as being unconstitutional and basically say, look, the FOMC members must answer to the president. There's no fourth branch of government in the Constitution. I could see them ruling that, the president has to be able to fire them because he's an elected official and they're not. And so, and it's not like the Supreme Court, because, you can't fire Supreme Court justices, but the Supreme Court is a third branch of government that's in the Constitution. The Federal Reserve is nowhere. You know, in
Right.
fact, a lot of times they say the Federal Reserve is the most powerful person in Washington. Well, then, but who's he accountable to? Nobody votes for him, right? So I think the Supreme Court may tear down Fed independence, which is going to be a problem because I think that's going to lessen confidence in the dollar, that we have a more politicized Fed, which is going to lead to a weaker dollar and higher inflation. Look, what is Donald Trump calling for? He wants massive rate cuts. That's bad for the dollar. That's bad for holders of U.S. Treasuries. So I think the movement, the rotation out of dollars into gold is not only going to continue, but it's going to broaden. I think central banks that haven't been buying gold are going to start buying. I think those that have been buying are going to buy more. And I think what's really going to happen more next year is that individual and institution investors, they're going to start buying gold. They haven't been buying gold in decades. They're going to start buying, right? You look at Morgan Stanley recently came out and said that the 60-40 portfolio, needs an upgrade, and it should be 60-20-20, where it's 20% gold, and you cut your bond allocation in half, which is also a big problem for the U.S. government because if foreign central banks are selling their dollars and U.S. investors are selling their dollars to buy gold, who's going to be buying all these bonds that the U.S. government is selling? The Fed is the only one left standing, but that means more inflation because the Fed can only buy bonds if it prints more money to pay for them. And that just means more inflation, a weaker dollar, which drives even more money into gold.
Much of the tension between gold supporters and Bitcoin fans stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of gold's utility. Critics sometimes claim gold is a useless rock, ignoring its industrial value in electronics, medicine, aerospace, and technology. Gold's extraction cost alone makes the idea of it being worth $50 an ounce absurd. If gold were that cheap, global demand would explode and mining would halt entirely. Bitcoin's narrative often frames itself as superior to gold, but digital scarcity does not replace physical function. Bitcoin is a speculative token driven by sentiment, while gold remains a tangible asset intertwined with real-world industry.
I mean, I'm sure, look, if you're a big buyer of gold, right, the last thing you want to do is let all the sellers know how much gold you want to buy or how much you've been buying, because the price will go up. So if you want to buy as much gold as possible at the lowest price possible, you're going to, keep your cards close to your vest so people don't know what you're up to.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think that China probably has a lot more gold than it admits to owning. On the flip side, we may have a lot less. That's, because we haven't had an audit of Fort Knox in well over 50 years. And even the Donald Trump administration early on, they were talking, yeah, we're going to audit the Fed. We're going to audit Fort Knox. We're going to find out how much gold we have. They haven't talked about that in a long time. They completely dropped that.
Why is that?
And well, the skeptic in me is probably that maybe Donald Trump was told by somebody that that's not a good idea because we don't have all that gold. And last thing we want is the world to recognize that because that will be a big problem for us. Or maybe they need to get it back. Maybe they have it legally, but they've loaned it all out and they need to get it before they do the audit. But the problem is if the government has loaned out all that gold, what if they don't get it back? What if the people who borrowed it sold it short and they don't even have it anymore?
Yeah.
So who knows? I mean, because the U.S. government may have been selling gold secretly or making it available so to suppress the market. Who knows? But
like
but
in
obviously,
the 60s with the London gold pool, for example. But
but if the U.S. government asks for its gold back, that means the people who borrowed that gold have to give it back. And if they don't have it, if they sold it, they have to buy it back, which will, of course, will push up the price.
Bitcoin today behaves like a high-risk collectible. Its price rises when more people want to hold it and falls when confidence fades. But it does not replicate the qualities that made gold a long-standing store of value: physical permanence, industrial use, historical continuity, and intrinsic utility. Comparing Bitcoin to digital gold is similar to calling a picture of food a meal. You can view it, but it cannot nourish you. Bitcoin may offer speculative upside, but it lacks gold's stability as a hedge during currency crises. For investors seeking protection rather than hype, the difference is profound.
Trump, on the one hand, he promised to end the war in Ukraine. He promised to release all the Epstein files. He promised to audit gold. He's just basically too big of all these promises. He's not able to deliver on these promises. Is that going to be, in the end, also his downfall then, that he promised too much and he can't deliver?
Well, that's what politicians do, right? They promise stuff to get votes. And Trump promised everything to everybody. Look, he promised no taxes on expats. He was going to eliminate the U.S. income tax on expats to get their vote, right? He hasn't even mentioned that ever since he was elected. So those guys got totally screwed. He kept his promises to the Bitcoin community. But that enabled a lot of the Bitcoiners to cash out, which is, I think, what happened. There are a lot of people now that are hoping he keeps his promises on Fannie and Freddie. We'll see. That would be another massive mistake. But if he's more interested in rewarding his friends and donors than helping the country, then maybe they'll be able to try to pull that IPO off. But I don't know what he's going to do. I've said about a crypto that unless there's a U.S. government bailout of Bitcoin, it's going to collapse. And I don't know that Trump is going to bail out Bitcoin, even though his whole family now is completely invested. But that's what people might be betting on. But the optics will be pretty bad. Especially if they have to fill up the strategic Bitcoin reserve as a Bitcoin bailout fund. Like if they say we need to buy Bitcoin to prop it up, how could it possibly be a strategic reserve if it needs a bailout? The whole purpose of a strategic reserve is to use that when you're in trouble. You can't use your strategic reserve to bail out what you could claim is strategic and needs to be in reserve. So I think he's going to have to walk away from the whole crypto thing. Otherwise, it's going to take down his presidency all by itself, because there's a big bubble in crypto. A lot of people are going to lose a lot of money. Some of them might blame Trump, but a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs. There are a lot of people now that work in the crypto industry. They're going to be unemployed. Not only are they going to be unemployed, they're going to be unemployed and broke, because a lot of the people who work in crypto are all in on crypto. They own crypto. That's one of the reasons they're working in it. So they're going to lose their jobs and their net worth at the same time, which is, a dangerous combination.
Gold's rise in recent years is not a speculative anomaly. Central banks worldwide have been accumulating record amounts of gold, partly in response to geopolitical tensions, U.S. sanctions, ballooning deficits, and growing distrust in dollar stability. Nations like China, Turkey, and India are shifting reserves away from U.S. Treasuries toward hard assets. With fiscal pressures mounting, political interference rising, and the Federal Reserve's independence being questioned, many governments see gold as a safer, non-politicized anchor for their currencies. As institutional investors reconsider long-held strategies, even major firms now recommend increasing gold allocations in place of bonds.
Yeah, well, look, there's bubbles everywhere. That's what the Fed has been doing. They're forever blowing bubbles. That is the problem with the monetary policy. But yeah, I agree that we have a bubble in AI. I think the AI bubble is bigger than the crypto bubble. But the crypto bubble, I believe, is bigger than the dot-com bubble. So you're talking about some massive bubbles. When you combine them into a super bubble, I think that the main difference between the crypto bubble and the AI bubble is, at least in the AI bubble, there's something real going on there. Just like with the internet bubble, the dot-com bubble, there was something real there. And some companies like Amazon, emerged out of that, right? But the vast majority, submerged permanently and went bankrupt. You got a handful of companies, eBay made it out of the originals. Priceline is still around, but the vast majority, 90+%, just, completely shut the doors, and that was it. AI is real. I think AI, has even more potential than the internet as far as improving the quality of human life. And maybe not just the quality, but the duration, right? There's all sorts of stuff that, if we can really have artificial intelligence and combine it with robotics, So it's not just mental labor that the machines can do, but skilled physical labor and just manual labor. Then in the long run, we don't have to do anything, right? We'll just have whatever we want, and we'll have an army of machines that are smarter than us and stronger than us to do all the work, right? That's ideal society. We spend all our time on other pursuits, right? We do things that we enjoy. And of course, ultimately, we'd wipe out poverty. So in the long run, this is a great thing that we've invented, and it has more potential than anything I think I've seen. The question is, how long is it going to take to fulfill that potential? And do a lot of the investments that are being made now in these data centers, are they even going to be necessary? I mean, it's like, who knows, how much more efficient things are going to be. Maybe we won't need all these GPUs. I don't know. And I also think that there's just a lot of money that's being, spent. And it seems to me like it's way ahead of itself. And I don't know how we can cover the finance costs, because we're spending a fortune. Where's that money coming from? Like, what aren't we doing in order to do this? There's not an unlimited amount of capital. And so if it's all going into building out data centers and all this equipment, what are we not doing? What is not getting funded that's going to be a big problem? And the benefits of AI may take 5 or 10 years or more to really start to show up. People think it's going to happen overnight. Things generally take longer than people think, even though the technology itself is very, very promising. So I think they're bubbles. I think both these bubbles could pop. The internet, the crypto bubble is almost a complete waste of resources, malinvestment. You'll have very little left. Maybe, I don't know how much demand there will be for stable coins. There'll probably be something for stable coins backed by, fiat currencies. I mean, I could see a role for those. I certainly see a role for tokenized gold, to the extent that you want a stable coin, you might as well have one that's stable with gold, because gold is stable. Fiat currencies are not. They just go down. Gold holds its value. So I think ultimately, and ironically, the blockchain winner will be gold. So blockchain isn't going to make gold obsolete. It's going to make gold better. It's going to make gold more efficient as a medium of exchange than it's ever been. So it's not the end of gold. Bitcoin isn't the end of gold. Gold's the end of Bitcoin. And it's the beginning. It's the beginning of gold.
The modern economy is swimming in speculative bubbles, from crypto to AI. While AI is rooted in tangible progress with potential long-term societal benefits, crypto's value remains overwhelmingly dependent on sentiment. Many tokens lack utility, and a downturn could erase jobs, wealth, and entire industries. Yet blockchain itself may find its true future in tokenized real assets, especially gold. The technology could make gold easier to trade, store, and transfer globally, enhancing its role rather than replacing it. In the end, Bitcoin is unlikely to render gold obsolete. More likely, the evolution of technology will reinforce gold's place in the next era of finance.